The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with fear. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat around a massive table, their faces showing worry and desperation. Above them, holographic displays showed star maps with large red zones marking dead space, where entire solar systems used to exist. Ambassador Kethvar from the Zilithian Empire stood at the center of the room. His blue skin had turned pale and his four eyes darted nervously as he spoke. The Void Swarm has taken another system. The Kepler colonies are gone, 3 billion lives, wiped out in less than 6 hours. Alex Carter sat quietly in the back corner. He was a human commander, and humans were still new to this galactic community. Earth had joined the Council only 50 years ago. Most aliens thought humans were weak and primitive compared to the great civilizations that had ruled space for thousands of years. Alex watched as the alien leaders argued and panicked. The Void Swarm was something from their worst nightmares. It was a collection of living ships that could eat entire planets. These bioships were controlled by one massive mind that learned from every battle. The last time they appeared was 1,000 years ago, and it took the combined effort of dozens of advanced civilizations to drive them away. General Vexthal activated a new holographic display. His forearms shook as he showed the latest battle reports. Our best weapons do nothing against them. We hit them with quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons. The bioships just absorbed the energy and became stronger. Every ship we lose teaches them new ways to kill us. Dr. Lisa Morgan was Earth's top scientist studying alien life. She sat next to Alex, carefully reading the data on her tablet. The numbers were terrifying. Each Void Swarm ship was the size of a small moon. They moved through space like living creatures, growing and changing as they fought. When they destroyed a ship, they would absorb its technology and crew, adding that knowledge to their collective mind. "What about the old weapons?" asked Prime Minister Zorith from the Crystal Hegemony. Her crystal body was glowing with stress. "The ancient protocols that drove them away before?" Sage Rindar, the oldest member of the council, shook his ancient head. "Those weapons are lost forever. The civilizations that built them destroyed themselves in the process. They used technology so dangerous that it killed the users along with the enemy. We have no such weapons now." Alex studied the tactical displays more carefully. Something was bothering him about the attack patterns. The Void Swarm wasn't just randomly destroying everything they found. They were being smart about their targets. They hit the biggest military bases first, then the shipyards and research stations. It was like they remembered which places would be the most dangerous to them. Dr. Morgan noticed the same thing. She leaned over to Alex and whispered, "They're not mindless monsters. They're fighting like generals who know exactly what they're doing." Outside the great windows of the council chamber, streams of refugee ships filled the darkness of space. Families from dozens of worlds were fleeing toward the center of the galaxy, hoping to find safety behind the remaining defense fleets. But everyone knew that safety was temporary. The swarm was coming, and it was hungry. Captain Jake Morrison from Earth's defense fleet joined Alex and Lisa at their table. His face was grim as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Meridian defense grid fell this morning. That was supposed to be the strongest fortress in known space. The bioships went through it like it was made of paper. The alien representatives continued their desperate discussions. Some wanted to evacuate everyone to the galactic core and make a final stand there. Others suggested trying to negotiate with the swarm, though nobody knew if such a thing was even possible. A few of the smaller species were already talking about surrender. Admiral Henry Brooks, the highest-ranking human officer in the galaxy, finally stood up from the human section. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. The other species often ignored human opinions. But the current crisis was so bad that even they were willing to listen to anyone with ideas. "What do we know about how they think?" Brooks asked the room. "This collective mind of theirs, how does it make decisions?" Dr. Morgan accessed her research files. "Based on our studies of the old records, the Void Swarm operates as a single consciousness spread across thousands of bioships. Every ship shares knowledge instantly with every other ship. When they encounter a new weapon or tactic, the entire fleet learns how to counter it within minutes. That's why our advanced weapons are useless," General Vexthal added bitterly. "The moment we use something against them, they adapt. By the second or third battle, they're immune to everything we have." Alex was still staring at the star maps. An idea was forming in his mind, but it was crazy. So crazy that even suggesting it might get him thrown out of the council chambers. But desperate times called for desperate measures. What if their greatest strength is also their weakness? He said quietly. The room began to quiet down as people heard the humans speak. They adapt to advanced technology because they understand it. They've been fighting high-tech civilizations for millions of years. But what if we use something so primitive, so basic, that their collective mind doesn't even recognize it as a real threat? Ambassador Kethvar laughed bitterly. You suggest we fight bioships that can eat stars with primitive weapons? This is not the time for jokes, human. I'm not joking, Alex replied, standing up slowly. Look at their adaptation patterns. They learn to counter energy weapons, exotic matter, quantum effects, all the advanced stuff. But I don't see any records of them fighting against simple kinetic weapons, bullets, explosives, the kind of basic technology that humans still use. The room erupted in arguments. Some aliens were insulted that a primitive human would suggest abandoning their advanced technology. Others were desperate enough to consider any option. Dr. Morgan was running calculations on her tablet. Actually, the math works. If their adaptation protocols are designed for high-tech threats, they might completely ignore low-tech ones. It's like bringing a sword to a gunfight except in reverse. Captain Morrison grinned for the first time in weeks. Are you seriously suggesting we go back to shooting bullets at space monsters? Maybe, Alex said. But first we need to survive long enough to try it. The debate continued late into the night, but everyone knew they were running out of time. The Void Swarm was coming and traditional warfare had already failed. Maybe it was time to try something completely different. Maybe it was time to fight like humans. 3 weeks had passed since the fall of the Meridian defense grid. The situation was getting worse every day. The Void Swarm now controlled almost half of known space, and their bioships were spreading like a disease across the galaxy. Every day brought news of another lost world, another defeated fleet. The emergency meeting was held deep underground on New Geneva Station, one of the few military bases that hadn't been attacked yet. The bunkers were cramped and hot, filled with the smell of recycled air and fear. Military leaders from dozens of species crowded around holographic displays, trying to find some way to stop the unstoppable. Admiral Henry Brooks looked older than his 60 years. The stress of commanding humanity's small fleet in this galactic war was taking its toll. Earth only had 200 ships, and most aliens considered them worthless antiques. While other species had mastered energy manipulation and exotic weapons, humans still relied on missiles and bullets. The numbers don't lie, said Dr. Kate Sullivan, the Council's best strategic computer expert. Her artificial intelligence programs had been running battle simulations non-stop for days. At the current rate of expansion, the swarm will reach the core worlds in 6 months. Our combined fleets might slow them down for a few weeks, but that's all. The alien commanders looked defeated. General Vexthal's forearms hung limply at his sides. Admiral Creeth of the bird-like avian coalition had her feathers flat against her body in a sign of despair. Even the proud warriors of the crystal hegemony seemed ready to give up. Captain Jake Morrison slammed his fist on the metal table. There has to be something we're missing. Some weakness we haven't found yet. These things aren't gods, they're just really tough animals. Actually, Alex Carter said from his spot near the tactical display, maybe there is something. Everyone turned to look at the human commander. Alex had been studying the battle reports for weeks, looking for patterns that others might have missed. What he found was disturbing, but it also gave him an idea. The Void Swarm adapts to our technology by eating it. Every time we hit them with an energy weapon, they learn how to use that energy themselves. But what if we used weapons so old and simple that they wouldn't bother to adapt? Admiral Brooks raised an eyebrow. Go on. Alex activated the central display and pulled up files from Earth's military history. The aliens watched in confusion as images appeared on the screen. Ancient sailing ships with cannons, fighter planes dropping bombs, soldiers carrying rifles and grenades. To the advanced civilizations of the galaxy, these weapons looked like museum pieces. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, Alex explained. We've learned how to kill with whatever we could find. Rocks, sticks, metal bullets, chemical explosives. While you were developing perfect energy shields, we were building weapons that punch holes through anything. Dr. Lisa Morgan was nodding slowly as she understood what Alex was suggesting. The swarm's adaptation system is designed to counter high-tech weapons, but it might not even recognize primitive projectiles as a real threat. General Vexthal's mandibles clicked in confusion. You want us to throw rocks at bioships the size of moons? Not rocks, Alex said with a grim smile. Bullets. Lots and lots of bullets. and missiles, and nuclear warheads, and anything else that works by hitting things really, really hard. The room erupted in arguments. Admiral Creeth screeched in outrage. You want us to abandon our advanced fleets for your primitive weapons? This is madness. Maybe it is, Alex admitted. But what's the alternative? Keep doing the same thing that's been failing for 3 weeks? Dr. Sullivan was already running new simulations on her computers. The theoretical framework is sound. Kinetic weapons operate on completely different principles from energy-based systems. If the swarm's adaptation protocols don't recognize them as threats, they might actually work, Captain Morrison finished. He was grinning despite the desperate situation. You're talking about going back to basics. Fighting dirty. Colonel Matt Thompson, Earth's top weapons expert, had been quiet during the discussion. Now he stood up and addressed the room. I've been studying the bioship hull samples we recovered from the Kepler system. Their organic armor is designed to absorb and redirect energy, but it's surprisingly vulnerable to simple physical trauma. A steel bullet moving fast enough would punch right through. The alien commanders exchanged uncertain looks. Their military traditions were based on honor, technology, and sophisticated tactics. The human proposal seemed barbaric to them. There's another factor to consider, Dr. Morgan added. The Void Swarm operates as a collective consciousness. They think like a single entity with perfect coordination, but human warfare is based on chaos, unpredictability, and individual initiative. We might be able to confuse them simply by not following any logical pattern. Commander Beth Palmer, leader of Earth's fighter squadrons, laughed grimly. You mean we're going to out-crazy the universe's most dangerous species? Something like that, Alex replied. But we'll need help. Human ships alone won't be enough. We need the alien fleets to work with us, to modify their ships with our weapons. The discussion continued for hours. Some species were willing to try anything, even if it meant using primitive human technology. Others were insulted by the suggestion that they should abandon their advanced weapons for bullets and bombs. Admiral Brooks finally called for order. Let's be practical about this. We can't force anyone to adopt human tactics, but we can offer our weapons and training to anyone willing to try. The Zilithian Empire will participate, announced Ambassador Kethvar. Our energy weapons have been useless against the swarm. Perhaps it is time to try something different. One by one, other species agreed to the plan. Not all of them, but enough to make a difference. The great shipyards began working around the clock to retrofit alien vessels with human ballistic weapons. Magnetic railguns replaced plasma cannons. Nuclear warheads took the place of antimatter torpedoes. Chief Engineer Linda Hayes supervised the modifications aboard a Zilithian dreadnought. The work was difficult because alien technology was so different from human systems. This feels like we're going backward in time, she muttered as she installed a primitive missile launcher where an elegant energy projector used to be. Sometimes you have to go backward to go forward, Colonel Thompson replied. He was training alien crews how to use weapons that most humans considered old-fashioned. The key is to remember that simple doesn't mean ineffective. The most important work was happening in the deepest levels of New Geneva Station. Dr. Sullivan and her team were studying every piece of data about the Void Swarm's behavior. If they were going to surprise the enemy, they needed to do something completely different from anything the galaxy had tried before. The pattern is clear, she explained to Admiral Brooks. The swarm doesn't just adapt to weapons. They learn from tactics, fleet movements, even communication methods. If we're going to beat them, we need to fight in a way that their collective mind has never seen before. Alex studied the tactical projections. Human warfare is different from anything else in the galaxy. We've always fought like underdogs because we usually were. We use tricks, lies, and dirty tactics. We hit where the enemy isn't looking. Captain Morrison nodded. And when they expect us to retreat, we attack. When they think we'll attack, we disappear. The key is to never do what makes sense. The alien commanders were learning to think like humans, and it was harder than they expected. But time was running out, and desperate situations called for desperate solutions. The Void Swarm was coming, and soon they would discover what happened when you forced humanity to get creative. The retrofit process was chaos. Across dozens of shipyards and space stations, alien crews worked frantically to install human weapons on their advanced starships. The elegant designs that had served the galaxy for centuries were being torn apart and rebuilt with crude, primitive systems that many considered barbaric. Captain Ryan Kelly stood on the bridge of his ship. the UHSS Defiance watching the work through the viewport. A Zilithian dreadnought was being modified at the dock next to his. The beautiful flowing lines of the alien ship were being interrupted by ugly human weapon mounts. Magnetic railguns stuck out from the hull like metal tumors. "This feels wrong," muttered Chief Engineer Linda Hayes as she supervised the installation work. She was helping alien crews learn how to maintain human ballistic systems. These ships were designed for energy weapons. "We're basically turning sports cars into tanks." Colonel Matt Thompson disagreed. "We're making them more effective. Energy weapons are elegant, but bullets get the job done." He was working 18-hour days, teaching crews from a dozen different species how to load, aim, and fire weapons that their civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago. The learning curve was steep. Alien engineers struggled to understand why humans would build weapons that required physical ammunition. Their energy-based systems could fire indefinitely as long as the ship had power. Human weapons needed constant resupply of bullets, missiles, and explosives. "It's inefficient," complained a crystal hegemony technician as he tried to figure out how to load a missile tube. His crystal body sparkled with frustration. "Inefficient, maybe," replied Sergeant Mike Davis, a human weapons instructor. "But when your target adapts to energy weapons, inefficient bullets still work fine." The real challenge was training the crews. Alien military doctrine was based on precise formations, calculated tactics, and predictable strategies. Human warfare was messier. It relied on individual initiative, creative thinking, and the willingness to break rules when necessary. Commander Beth Palmer was running fighter pilot training sessions that horrified the alien instructors. Instead of teaching proper formation flying, she was showing pilots how to break formation, fly unpredictably, and use their ships as weapons when their ammunition ran out. "The key is chaos," she explained to a group of Avian Coalition pilots. Their feathered faces showed confusion and concern. "Don't fly in straight lines. Don't follow predictable patterns. Make it impossible for the enemy to guess what you're going to do next." "But this violates every principle of proper flight tactics," protested Squadron Leader Creeth. "Our formations are designed for maximum efficiency and mutual support." "Your formations are designed to fight other civilized species," Palmer replied bluntly. "The Void Swarm isn't civilized. They're predators. And the best way to fight a predator is to be more dangerous than they are." Meanwhile, in the deepest research labs of New Geneva Station, Dr. Kate Sullivan was working on the most important part of the plan. Her artificial intelligence systems were analyzing every piece of data about Void Swarm behavior, looking for patterns that could be exploited. "The concerning thing is here," she explained to Admiral Brooks and the other senior commanders. "The swarm doesn't just adapt to weapons. They learn from everything. Combat tactics, communication frequencies, even the way we organize our fleets. If we're going to surprise them, we need to do something their collective consciousness has never seen before." Dr. Lisa Morgan was studying biological samples from destroyed bioships. Their adaptation mechanism is incredibly sophisticated. When they encounter a new threat, they can modify their entire fleet within hours. "But there's a weakness in the system." "What kind of weakness?" asked Alex Carter. "They're a collective mind, which means they think like a single entity. Every decision is logical, calculated, and predictable. But human warfare is based on illogical decisions made by individuals who don't always communicate with each other." Captain Jake Morrison grinned. "You're saying we should fight like a bunch of crazy people who don't know what they're doing?" "In a way, yes," Dr. Morgan replied. "The swarm expects coordinated, rational opposition. They've been fighting advanced civilizations for millions of years, and those civilizations always used logical tactics. Humans are the first species they'll encounter that fights irrationally on purpose." The implications were staggering. Instead of trying to outthink the Void Swarm, humanity was proposing to outcrazy them. It was a strategy that went against everything the galaxy considered proper military doctrine. Admiral Henry Brooks called a meeting of all the fleet commanders willing to try the human approach. Representatives from 8 different species gathered in the station's main briefing room. The Zilithian Empire, the Avian Coalition, the Crystal Hegemony, and 5 smaller civilizations had agreed to modify their ships with human weapons. "I want to be clear about what we're asking," Brooks said to the assembled aliens. "We're not just asking you to use different weapons. We're asking you to abandon everything your species considers proper warfare. You'll need to think like humans, fight like humans, and be prepared to die like humans. General Vexthal raised one of his forearms. What exactly does it mean to fight like humans? Alex stood up and activated the holographic display. Images appeared showing human military history. Medieval knights charging into overwhelming odds, pilots ramming their planes into enemy ships, soldiers holding impossible positions against superior forces. Humans fight like every battle is personal, Alex explained. We don't retreat when the odds are bad. We don't surrender when the situation is hopeless. We keep fighting until we win or until we're dead. The alien commanders looked uncomfortable. Their species valued survival and strategic withdrawal. The human concept of fighting to the death seemed wasteful and primitive. There's more, continued Colonel Thompson. Human tactics are based on deception, surprise, and doing whatever works. We'll lie to the enemy. We'll pretend to retreat and then attack. We'll sacrifice our own ships to destroy theirs. We'll use any trick, any weapon, any strategy that gives us an advantage. Admiral Creeth ruffled her feathers nervously. This sounds like barbarism, not military strategy. Maybe it is barbarism, admitted Captain Kelly. But civilized tactics haven't worked against the swarm. Maybe it's time to try uncivilized ones. The debate continued for hours. Some commanders were enthusiastic about the new approach. Others were horrified by the idea of abandoning their military traditions. But everyone knew they were running out of options. The first test would come soon. Void swarm scouts had been detected near the Outer Rim territories. The modified human-alien fleet would have a chance to see if their crazy plan actually worked. Dr. Sullivan ran final simulations on her computers. The mathematical models are inconclusive. We're trying to predict the behavior of a system that's designed to be unpredictable, but the theoretical framework suggests we have a chance. Captain Morrison checked the status of his ship's new weapons. A chance is all we need. Humans have won battles with worse odds. As the fleet prepared to depart, Admiral Brooks addressed all the crews over the communication system. Today we find out if being the galaxy's most dangerous species means anything when facing the void itself. Remember, we're not trying to outthink the enemy. We're trying to outfight them. The ships moved out toward their first encounter with the void swarm. Behind them, the refugee fleets continued their desperate flight toward the galactic core. Everything depended on whether humanity's primitive weapons and chaotic tactics could succeed where advanced civilization had failed. The universe was about to learn what happened when monsters were forced to call on even bigger monsters for help. The first test came without warning. Long-range sensors detected 12 bioships approaching the Outer Rim territories. Each void swarm vessel was the size of a small moon, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. They moved through space like living creatures, which in many ways they were. Commander Beth Palmer led her fighter squadron toward the enemy formation. Her pilots had trained for weeks in the chaotic, unpredictable tactics that humans called normal warfare. Now it was time to see if their crazy approach would work against an enemy that had devoured civilizations for millions of years. Dragon Squadron, remember what we practiced? Palmer's voice crackled over the communication system. No formations, no predictable patterns. Fight like you're protecting your own homeworlds. The human and alien fighters scattered in all directions as they approached the bioships. To any traditional military observer, it looked like complete chaos. Pilots flew in random spirals, sudden turns, and aggressive attack runs that seemed to follow no logical plan. The void swarm vessels tried to track the incoming fighters, but their collective consciousness was confused by the erratic movement patterns. For thousands of years, they had fought against organized, disciplined fleets that followed predictable tactical doctrines. This was something completely different. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Sarah Collins rolled her craft into a dive that would have gotten her court-martialed in any normal military. She fired her magnetic projectile weapons at point-blank range into the bioship's organic hull. The primitive bullets punched holes through tissue that had adapted to deflect energy weapons. "It's working," she shouted over the radio. "The bullets are going right through their armor." The bioships retaliated with energy beams and organic missiles, but the chaotic flight patterns made it almost impossible to achieve target locks. Human pilots had trained their entire careers to fly unpredictably. For them, random evasion was natural. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the main battle group from his ship, the UGS Retribution. The vessel had been completely retrofitted with human ballistic weapons. Where elegant energy projectors once stood, crude magnetic railguns now bristled from the hull. All ships, prepare to engage, Morrison ordered. Target their organic sections, not their energy cores. We want to punch holes, not feed them more power to absorb. The alien crews manning human weapons felt strange firing such primitive projectiles. They were used to weapons that required complex calculations and exotic physics. Human weapons just pointed at the target and fired chunks of metal very fast. Fire magnetic torpedoes full spread, ordered the Zilithian weapons officer aboard Morrison's ship. His forearms worked the unfamiliar controls with growing confidence. The kinetic warheads slammed into the bioships with devastating results. Instead of being absorbed like energy weapons, the simple projectiles just punched holes through organic tissue. The Void Swarm vessels shuddered as their adaptation systems failed to categorize the threat. By the ancient stars, whispered the alien gunnery chief, the primitive weapons are actually hurting them. But the real shock came when the largest bioship began broadcasting a signal that chilled every alien commander to their core. Dr. Lisa Morgan, monitoring from the command ship, felt her blood run cold as she translated the ancient swarm language. They're sending a distress call, she announced over the fleet communication channel. But that's not the worst part. Admiral Henry Brooks was commanding from the flagship. What's the worst part, Doctor? The signal classifies our fleet as unknown hostile species, threat level maximum. They're marking humans as more dangerous than any civilization in their recorded history. The implications were staggering. The Void Swarm had fought against advanced species with weapons that could destroy stars. They had battled civilizations with technology beyond imagination, but they had never encountered anything like human warfare. Alex Carter was coordinating the battle from the Tactical Command Center. Good, let them be afraid. It's about time something in this galaxy was scared of us. The battle continued with increasing intensity. More bioships were arriving through jump space, but instead of their usual coordinated assault, they seemed hesitant and confused. The collective consciousness was struggling to adapt to opponents who fought without logic or predictable patterns. Captain Ryan Kelly led his destroyer squadron in what became known as the Human Maneuver. His ships deliberately damaged their own hulls and systems to appear defeated. When the bioships moved in to consume the seemingly helpless vessels, the human crews detonated nuclear warheads at point-blank range. For every ship we lose, we take 5 of theirs, Kelly reported as his vessel's hull buckled under enemy fire. Just like Admiral Brooks said, we make them pay for every piece of space. The alien crews were learning to fight like humans, and the transformation was remarkable. Species that had valued honor and proper tactics for thousands of years were now using deception, ramming attacks, and suicide runs. The Zilithian captain of a modified dreadnought rammed his ship directly into a biovessel's mouth, his crew fighting hand-to-hand combat in the corridors as both ships died. This is insane, reported Admiral Creeth from her Avian Coalition cruiser. But she was grinning as she said it, her feathers bristling with excitement. We're actually winning. The turning point came when one of the bioships tried to retreat. In all of galactic history, the Void Swarm had never retreated from any battle. They consumed everything or they were destroyed. But faced with an enemy that fought like rabid animals, the collective consciousness made a decision based on survival rather than hunger. They're running, announced Commander Palmer as she pursued the fleeing bioship with her remaining fighters. The monsters are actually running from us. But even as some bioships fled, others continued fighting with desperate fury. The collective consciousness was fragmenting as different parts of it reached different conclusions about how to handle the human threat. Dr. Kate Sullivan was monitoring the battle from New Geneva Station. Her artificial intelligence systems were analyzing the swarm's communication patterns in real time. Something's changed in their network. The collective consciousness is arguing with itself. Some parts want to retreat, others want to escalate. What does that mean for us? Asked Colonel Matt Thompson. It means we've done something no other species has ever accomplished. We've made the Void Swarm doubt itself. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it finally ended, the human-alien fleet had lost 40 ships but destroyed or driven off all 12 biovessels. By galactic standards, it was a miracle. By human standards, it was a good start. Captain Morrison surveyed the battlefield from his damaged bridge. Casualty report? Heavy losses but within acceptable parameters, replied his executive officer. More importantly, we proved that the plan works. Admiral Brooks addressed the entire fleet over the communication system. Today we learned something important. The Void Swarm can be beaten, not with superior technology or elegant tactics, but with determination, creativity, and the willingness to fight dirty. The victory was celebrated across the refugee fleets, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. The swarm would adapt to this new threat just as they had adapted to everything else. The next battle would be harder, but for the first time since the crisis began, the galaxy had hope. The humans had shown that even the most advanced enemy could be confused, hurt, and defeated by opponents who refused to fight fair. As the damaged fleet limped back toward friendly space, alien crews worked alongside human engineers to repair their primitive weapons. They were learning that sometimes the best technology was the simplest technology, especially when your enemy expected you to be complicated. The Void Swarm had made a mistake. They had assumed that all intelligent species would fight like civilized beings. They had never encountered a species that considered civilization optional when survival was at stake. They were about to learn why humans were called the most perilous species in the galaxy. The final battle began in the graveyard of the Meridian system, where the broken remains of dead worlds bore witness to the Void Swarm's endless hunger. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to unfold among the bones of civilization. Admiral Henry Brooks stood on the command deck of the flagship UGS Last Stand, surrounded by holographic displays showing the impossible odds they faced. 3,000 bioships had gathered for what the swarm's collective consciousness considered the final solution to the human problem. Against them stood 800 modified vessels from 12 different species, each one bristling with primitive human weapons. All ships. "This is Admiral Brooks," he announced across the fleet-wide communication channel. "Today we find out if being the most dangerous species in the galaxy means anything when we're facing extinction itself." The bioships advanced in perfect formation, their organic hulls pulsing with alien intelligence. They had learned from the previous battle and adapted their tactics. But the humans had been adapting too, and human adaptation was different from anything the swarm had ever encountered. Captain Ryan Kelly led his destroyer squadron in the opening move. Instead of the expected frontal assault, his ships scattered in all directions and began firing at seemingly random targets. To the swarm's collective mind, it looked like chaos, but there was method to the madness. "Execute pattern, Crazy Ivan," Kelly ordered his squadron. "All ships, pick your own targets and attack independently." The human tactic was simple but effective. Instead of coordinating their assault, each ship fought its own battle. The Void Swarm's collective consciousness could predict organized tactics, but it couldn't predict what 800 individual captains would decide to do on their own. Commander Beth Palmer's fighter squadrons performed the infamous suicide run maneuver. They flew their small craft directly into the mouths of bioships, detonating nuclear warheads at point-blank range. It was a tactic that any sane military would consider wasteful, but it was devastatingly effective. "Dragon Squadron, follow me in," Palmer commanded as she led her remaining fighters toward a bioship the size of a city. "We're going to knock on their front door with a nuclear gift." The explosion that followed took out not just her target, but 3 other bioships that had been positioned too close together. Palmer's sacrifice saved thousands of lives and opened a hole in the swarm's formation. Captain Jake Morrison commanded his battle group from the heavily damaged cruiser UGS Defiance. His ship had been rebuilt so many times with human weapons that it barely resembled its original design. The elegant curves had been replaced with angular armor and ugly weapon mounts that stuck out like mechanical spines. "All guns, continuous fire," Morrison ordered. "Don't stop shooting until we run out of bullets or they run out of ships." The kinetic weapons hammered at the bioships with relentless fury. Magnetic railguns fired steel projectiles at incredible speeds. Missile tubes launched chemical warheads in endless streams. Nuclear torpedoes detonated in brilliant flashes that lit up the darkness of space. The alien crews had learned to fight like humans, and the transformation was remarkable. The Zilithian commander of a modified dreadnought was screaming battle cries in his native language as his ship rammed through a biovessel's organic hull. Crystal Hegemony pilots were performing kamikaze runs that would have horrified their ancestors. "This is madness," reported Admiral Creeth from her Avian Coalition flagship, but she was laughing as she said it, her ship's weapons blazing at everything within range. Glorious, beautiful madness. The battle raged across the entire star system, Bioships that had survived for millions of years were being torn apart by weapons their collective mind couldn't fully comprehend. They tried to adapt, but human warfare was based on constant change and improvisation. Dr. Lisa Morgan monitored the battle from the medical bay, treating wounded soldiers from a dozen different species. She watched alien and human crews fight side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of a common enemy. The humans had given the galaxy something more valuable than weapons. They had given them the will to fight like their lives depended on it. The turning point came when Alex Carter led a boarding party onto the swarm's command vessel. The bioship was the size of a small planet, its organic corridors pulsing with alien intelligence. It served as the central node for the collective consciousness, the brain that controlled the entire fleet. "Breacher charges are set," reported Sergeant Mike Davis as the human assault team fought their way through corridors lined with living tissue. They were using chemical explosives and kinetic weapons against an enemy that could absorb energy attacks. Alex placed the final explosive device in the neurological center, a vast chamber filled with floating brain clusters that contained the memories of every civilization the swarm had consumed. "This is for every world you've destroyed," he said quietly, "and for teaching the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous species is exactly what you need." The explosion that followed didn't just destroy the command ship. It severed the collective consciousness that had held the swarm together for eons. Across the battlefield, bioships began turning on each other as individual fragments of the hive mind fought for control. Captain Morrison watched from his battle-scarred bridge as the enemy fleet tore itself apart. "They're fighting each other. The collective mind is broken." Without their unified consciousness, the bioships became vulnerable in ways they had never been before. Ships that had seemed invincible when working together were now isolated targets that could be destroyed one at a time. The remaining human and alien forces pressed their advantage. They had learned to fight with determination, creativity, and the absolute refusal to give up. Every ship that fell took multiple biovessels with it. Every pilot who died made sure their sacrifice counted. As the battle reached its climax, the surviving swarm vessels began to flee into deep space. For the first time in millions of years, they were running from their prey instead of consuming it. Admiral Brooks surveyed the battlefield from his damaged flagship. Hundreds of ships from both sides floated dead in space, but the galaxy had been saved. All stations report casualties and status. The numbers were staggering. The combined fleet had lost over half its ships, but they had broken the Void Swarm's power forever. Without their collective consciousness, the bioships were just animals fighting for survival, instead of an organized force of extinction. "The refugees can go home," announced Dr. Kate Sullivan from New Geneva Station. "The swarm is broken. The fragments are fleeing in all directions." In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and the long work of reconstruction began, the galactic community took time to reflect on what had happened. They had called on humanity for help when no one else could save them, and humans had delivered in the most dangerous way possible. Captain Palmer, her fighter squadron reduced to 3 surviving craft, transmitted one final message to the fleet. Maybe being dangerous isn't something to be ashamed of. Maybe it's something the universe needs when everything else fails. Admiral Creeth, her avian coalition cruiser barely holding together, added her own thoughts. "We learned something today. When civilization itself is threatened, you don't call the most advanced species or the most honorable or the wisest. You call the species that refuses to quit," Captain Morrison agreed from his battle-damaged ship. "You call the ones who fight like every battle is personal." Admiral Brooks looked out at the stars where reconstruction fleets were already beginning their work. The galaxy would rebuild stronger than before, but they would never forget the lesson they had learned about human nature. "The galaxy discovered something important today," he said to his crew. "When there's no hope left and extinction is staring you in the face, you don't call for heroes or saints or geniuses. You call the humans. You call the species that thinks impossible is just another word for challenging." In the years that followed, as new alliances were forged and old enemies became friends, the galaxy would remember this battle as the moment they learned what humanity hell yeah really meant. Not because humans were perfect, but because when everything else failed, they were exactly what the universe needed. A species too stubborn to accept defeat and too dangerous to ignore.